Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Tom Walters is one of my favorite people. He's fun, he's wise, he's curious and good-hearted. Tom teaches meditation, a practice he's personally followed for over 40 years. His podcast, Zen Commuter, is 10 years old this year, and today he shares some of the wisdom that has come his way. Please welcome Tom Walters to Bump in the Road. Tom, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for having me today. I will give you the Reader's Digest version. My listeners know it very well, obviously, probably too well. But for your listeners, I'm a meditation instructor, and I've been meditating for about, I don't want to do the math. Well, you know what? I don't care about the math. I'm going to be 60 this week. So I've been meditating for over 2/3 of my life, for 40 years. I learned when I was 18. The story of my meditation journey way back in the day. My mom was very progressive, extremely progressive. The stuff that you and I talk about and the stuff that we talk about with our guests, she was talking about in 1982. And so she brought in probably about 10 people in from the community that I grew up in and had 2 other meditation teachers come in. And this was 1982, so meditation wasn't even a thing, not like it is today, at the risk of sounding 500 years old. But they'd get together in the house, in the front end of the house, and for the first, I'd say, year, I'd ask my mom, like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, we're just going to talk about meditation." And I didn't know much about it at that point, but I was fascinated. I was intrigued. I'm like, "Can I join you?" And for whatever reason, and I probably should ask her next time we get together in a meditation why she was reticent, but she's like, "Well, maybe later, sweetheart." So, but I wasn't to be denied. I literally pressed my ear up against the door where they were and be like, "Wow, that sounds really, really cool." And then for whatever reason, my mom acquiesced and she's like, "Do you want to join us tonight?" I'm like, I played it cool, of course, because I was a cool kid. And that is totally sarcastic. I wasn't cool at all. And she'd say, I'm like, yeah, that's whatever. That's cool. So I joined that day. And that's where I learned how to meditate with her and Ken and Lillian, who I'm sure have passed away, but they might be in another form or might be zipping around the universe like my mom is. But for whatever reason, I learned how to meditate. And much like I tell my listeners and my students, I'm like, my meditation then and my meditation now are like 2 totally different animals. For the first couple of years, I meditated on a Saturday and a Tuesday, Tuesday with a group and Saturday on my own because I wasn't in school or reading comic books or at work. And then when I went away to college, it was finals time and I think I was homesick. I was lonely. I was stressed. And I'm like, oh, why isn't it Saturday when I can meditate? And then I had this wild epiphany. I'm like, oh, that's right. I can do this anytime. So I went to the chapel of the university and was the only one there, obviously, and just sat and I meditated. And I'm like, yeah, this has got to stick. This is awesome. And that was the beginning of my meditation journey. And it's continued on for 40 plus years. And it wasn't, and I did all the traditional things. So I'm like, okay, got to go to school, got to get a job. Before I knew that I didn't need to go to school and I didn't need to get a job, but I finished school and just went searching. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And in my previous to meditation, I was listing this to a guest before, and that was when I was really young. I wanted to be a magician, then a veterinarian, graphic designer, hotel, restaurant, travel administration, psychologist, until when I was at Fidelity after 11 years. I just said, I think I'm done. I think I'm done searching and looking. I'm like, I'm just going to hoof it. I'm like, there's something out there for me, and I got to find out what it is. And there wasn't an urging, but it was just like, you're done. Your path is going to go somewhere else. That's what my guide said. So I left Fidelity, and I've been teaching Zen. I've been on Zen Commuters. Again, my show, my podcast is going to be going on for 10 years in April. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's absolute
That's
joy.
A big deal.
Well, it's so funny because I totally sense that. And whenever I tell people that, they're like, oh my God, really? And I'm like, yeah. But the more moving part is I get to meet wonderful people like yourself, and I'm just surrounded by, I mean, at the risk of sounding corny and woo, I'm just like surrounded by love and wisdom every day. And I'm like, oh God, I never in a million years would have thought my life would turn out like this. And I couldn't be happier. So that is not the Reader's Digest version that I promised, but that's the story so far.
One of the things you mentioned is that your meditation changed greatly over this period. Talk about that a little bit, because I think people think of meditation as something static, and it's not at all.
No. In fact, the past 2 days, I've gotten a question from guests and from students asking that very thing. It's like, what type of meditation do you practice? And I said, all. And so I don't mean to be glib or evasive. It's just like there are so many different aspects of meditation that it can change. And for those or people that are just starting meditation practice, I would encourage them to explore whatever moves them, whether it be a Tonglen meditation, a Zazen, loving kindness, mindfulness, insight, whatever it is. And to that point, way back in the day when I learned how to meditate, it wasn't anything like it is now. It was more guided meditations that were led by the instructors, and they were mostly guided. And then through the years, I studied different methods of meditating. The most beneficial I find now are to be open awareness meditations or insight meditations, where an open awareness meditation isn't focused per se. You simply sit in silence and you allow anything to come in objectively. So if you are sitting and you have a thought, just recognize thought, thinking, not like, oh, I remember my boss yelled at me. I'm like, oh, that really pissed me off. And I'm like, oh, you don't get wrapped up in the whole story. You just like thought, cool. Next thing, a car goes by. You're like, sound, car. So those are beneficial, and those are beneficial for me because they definitely open up a channel for me and my guides. I mean, the channel is always open, obviously, but my receptivity is more open at those times. Same with an insight meditation, where I'll sit on my cushion and say, as a human, this happened, and I don't get it. Universe, you want to shed some light on it? Sometimes they will. Sometimes they won't. They always do, but not in my time frame. Sometimes it'll be 2 weeks down the road. I'll be like, oh, that's what you were getting at. I didn't understand it then. And they're like, yeah, it's all good. But to my point and to your point, I think a practice has to change. Or, I mean, we're going to be doing, hopefully, we're going to have a practice for the rest of our natural lives. So, I mean, I don't even brush my teeth the same way, take a shower the same way, because I do it every day. But I'm like, okay, you know what? We'll start with the front, go down the bottom, just to change things up, because I'm like, this is boring. So with a meditation practice, same thing. It's like, yeah, whatever you feel compelled to do, and compelled is a very unmeditative word, but whatever spirit moves you, so to speak, to meditate a certain way, then just do that. And to the overarching point of your question, and the answer that I gave yesterday to a guest was, I don't know until I sit down on my cushion. Sometimes I'll have a question to ask the universe, but most times I'm like, what do I need? And more to the point, what does the world need? And when I put that question out there, those times I always get an answer right away. So I think the changing of a meditation practice is to be expected. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because for people that are new to meditating, there are so many misperceptions that there's one way to meditate. There's a right way to meditate, and there isn't, and there isn't. So they think, whether it be from following social media or other avenues, that this is how you do it. This is how you have to do it. I'm like, no, it isn't. It's not that rigid. And that's coming from me. I'm a pretty regimented guy, but it's not that rigid at all. Maybe that's why my meditation practice has been so beneficial, because it just tells me to just say, dude, you don't know the answers. Just lighten up. Just relax.
Yeah, I tell people sound can be an entree to meditation. Obviously, guided meditations are wonderful. I think nature is a huge entree to
Massive.
meditation.
Massive.
Yeah.
I love
How
how
can
you
you?
Well,
No,
not to cut you off, but yeah, to your point, I love those very two things. And that's why I'm so eager, because like when I meditate in the winter, it's a little tough because I typically meditate outside. I take a walk in the woods, and then I end up at the bleachers at the university in my town, and then I just sit in the bleachers. The sun's coming up, and I meditate. But in the winter, it's a little different because I sequester myself to my chair in front of my window in my bedroom and just look out. So it's a little different. But yeah, nature is wonderful because you feel so, for me anyway, I just feel so connected. When I meditate, I always feel connected to all life in different degrees. Some days it's wildly profound and palpable, where I can feel the energy and the connection of all life. And other times, like, yeah, I'm here. I'm part of everything. When I'm outside, it's so much easier because you feel the wind on your face and on your skin. You hear birds. You feel the sun. And you're like, yeah, it's. How could you not feel connected now?
no, but you bring up a really important point, and that is the experience of a meditation practice is uneven.
Oh yeah, yep.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and when it's not quite clicking for you, that's when you have to stick with it.
Yeah, I love that epiphany, because you are absolutely right. Because, I mean, meditation at its core goes against the very nature of society. I was talking about this with a guest the other day, how our culture here in the United States, and I'm sure it is in many other parts of the world, it's like go, go, go. It's like your value is determined by what you produce, how far you climb up the ladder, how many points you scored on the field. And we're always have these metrics to say, if you haven't done anything, if you're not doing anything, you're a blight on society, where, of course, we know that that's not even close to the case. So whenever you sit down, you're automatically going against general consensus in society. So that's one of the things that really I have to kind of bring home to my students, is that, like, what you're doing is not normal. And I hesitate to use the word normal, but it goes against what society says you should be doing. Society never says, yeah, just sit, just turn inwardly. Don't look for validation outside of who you are. It's all inside. No, society says, yeah, you get that car, you're there. You get that guy, that girl, you are with it. And to your point, the thing that is most salient is many times our culture also says here in the United States, if something is difficult or makes you feel uncomfortable, stop it, silence it, squash it, run away from it. So with a meditation practice, you're right. Some things, there have been meditation practices where I literally am sobbing, that whether I'm feeling personally sad, connecting to emotions, or I'm feeling the pain of the universe or the pain of the world. And just being with those thoughts and with those feelings, more importantly, are important. So it's always going to change. And I tell people, I've been meditating for over 40 years. They're like, do you ever have a tough time? I'm like, oh, absolutely. There are times my brain is just like all over the place in a human way. And sometimes I'll get done with my chair. I'm like, I did it. Nothing profound, nothing earth shattering. Not the most chill I've ever, felt in my life, but I got it done. And it's not something we have to check off a list, but it's just something that you point out so articulately, that we have to be open to anything, the unevenness, however it comes, and be thankful for whatever comes, believe it or not. Sometimes when we have those meditations where we experience pain or sadness, or just experience something different that might be troubling, those are things to be grateful for as well, because they give us a glimpse at what the antithesis is as well. And even at 60, I still get this message all the time. It's like in the moments where I'm what I call my human self, where I'm like in the day, like, I got to do the podcast notes, I got to do this, I got to go pick up bread. And I'm like wildly human, not even feeling that I'm connected to everything, even though I am. There might be times that I get in a funk. I'm like, I don't feel the happy, joyous me that I am most of the cases. So I sit down, and in my meditation, I'm told, sit with it, because in sitting with it, you'll understand the joy when it comes. I'm like, okay. And I get that all the time. So even when my guides start to talk, I'm like, yeah, okay. You didn't even have to say it. I got it. Be with what is and be thankful that it's showing me something different to experience from the joy and the bliss. So when the joy and bliss come, I'm like, wow, this is a life.
And speaking of being with what is, when difficult feelings or pain comes up, that is the universe, your body, everything screaming at you, your soul, saying you need to find out what's going on here.
Right.
And and that requires introspection, not running around and staying busy. But interestingly, if you run around and stay busy, you can avoid the pain for a while.
Yeah.
But not indefinitely.
Nope. And you bring up two good points, because one of the challenges that many people have is insomnia, because much to your point, they've got all these thoughts in their head. They're like, yeah, I'm not sitting still for a second, because these thoughts will catch up. And if they catch up, they're going to pummel me. That's a perception, or quite possibly misperception. But to my point, when they put their head on the pillow, all those thoughts, their body says, yeah, you're not going anywhere now. I got you. So you can just sit here and think about all the thoughts you ran from all during the day. And of course, that means tossing, turning, not being able to sleep. So yeah, absolutely. But we have to be with those things. And the other thing too is to realize that, and I've been talking about this a lot on Zen Commuter, is that thoughts create our lives. The thoughts we think, the quality of the thoughts of our lives either create a heaven or a hell. And I know many people are like, well, I can't control my thoughts. I'm like, well, it's not so much about needing to control them. It's just not becoming reactive with them. A meditation practice is so good for kind of putting our life on a movie screen where we're like, huh, cool. And we just look like, oh, that's me getting pissed off, or that's me in love, or that's me happy. And it just allows us that space to look at something and say, huh, that's just a thought. And as I say many times, and many people will probably think I am absolutely certifiably insane, that all thoughts are an illusion. They're all made up. Absolutely the thought that my name is Tom, yeah, that is, my name is Tom, but it really isn't. Somebody gave me the name Tom. The sky is blue. Well, what's blue? Who taught you what blue is? And is the sky blue to somebody that's blind? So all thoughts are made up. So that helps us get behind that, taking the energy out of a thought. So all those thoughts that people run from, if we just stop and look at them and say, okay, that's a thought, and just look at it very objectively, it kind of loses its power. And I say that like very glibly, like it's easy to do. And it's easier with a meditation practice, obviously, but it's not an easy practice if you don't have a meditation practice. Many people, the space between stimulus and response is a nanosecond.
But actually, I think you bring up something really important, and that is when you learn to watch your thoughts, all of a sudden you become aware. Because you're aware of what you're thinking. You're aware of how you're reacting. It's a total paradigm shift in terms of how you experience life.
Indeed. Because it's like, and I alluded to it maybe, and you brought it much more articulately. It's like that objectivity, that being able to step outside yourself, and much like I was talking about before, like watching your life on a movie screen, instead of just getting all wrapped up in the thoughts. You are kind of removed, looking at the thought, as opposed to totally enmeshed in the thought. When we're enmeshed in a thought, so many things happen. Obviously, emotion, reaction, and things that we think are beyond our control and our perception. Whereas with a meditation practice, we can say, okay, yeah, you feel your body. I'm like, yeah, I'm starting to get pissed off. I'm like, okay, cool. What do you want to do with that? I'm like, well, now that I know it, I can take some deep breaths to trigger the relaxation response. But also sometimes maybe I just want to feel it. Maybe I just want to look at it and see, where's this coming from? What can I learn from this? And that's the most important thing that I take away from my meditation practice and just living in a meditative state throughout my whole life. It's like, something's coming up. How do I see this in a way that's going to propel me forward? And I would imagine with the work that you do with Bump in the Road, that's exactly what many of your guests have expressed as well. It's like, instead of playing the victim and being like, oh, this is the worst thing to happen, it's like, no, it happened. And how do I go forward? I mean, your story that you shared on Zen Commuter so lovingly and articulately is that very same thing. Anybody else could have been absolutely in a puddle, in the fetal position in a corner with the things that you went through. But you're like, yeah, no, they're just things. They're not going to define me. I'll define me. And I find that incredibly admirable. So I'm glad to be able to reciprocate on your show, because you being on my show was an absolute gift.
Oh, we had so much fun.
We did.
A thought for you. If thoughts are ephemeral, they're not tangible, they're not meaningful, they're just thoughts. What is real?
I laugh because there are two answers. One comes from my mom, and one is coming from me with a different perspective, but with the same answer, and that is nothing. Nothing is real. I remember when I was younger, and this was like 10 years old, and my listeners have heard this story, but yours haven't. I remember getting caught up in some pre-adolescent drama about somebody didn't like me, or somebody hated me, or somebody pushed me, or whatever. It's like something bad was happening. I can't remember what it was. And I just remember my mom and I were driving, and I'm just like pouring out my heart. I'm like, Mom, this is the worst. This stinks. She's like, and she just, we're at a stoplight, and she just turned to me. She's like, sweetheart, relax. It's just an illusion. And that my 10-year-old brain couldn't grasp
I was going to say, was that helpful?
I'm like, why am I even talking to you? It's like talking to the dog. I'm like, you don't get it. You are not buying into my drama. Ugh. And obviously, as I have grown and hopefully wizened, I say, oh, now I get exactly what you're talking about. And I've experienced that. And believe it or not, I'll share another experience real briefly. I was out on one of my walks. I had just gotten done meditating. I was coming down this hill, and at the top of this hill, I could see all the town in the distance. And I'm looking around, and then I had that very thought. And it wasn't so much a thought as a feeling. I'm looking at everything. I'm like, this is all just a projection. This is all just an illusion. For whatever reason, I created this, and it doesn't scare me. I'm like, anybody else would see this and be like, if you don't see this as real, you are BS crazy, because this is real. And I'm just looking at it like, no, it's an illusion. And it doesn't scare me that it's an illusion, because I called myself here. I created all this. So the overarching question, or the overarching answer, is nothing. And that shouldn't scare us. It only scares us if we are tethered to the perception that this body is all that there is, this life is all there is. But I've seen far too much in my meditations and experienced far too much outside of the perceivable world to know that this is not even close to it. So it's an illusion, and it's a beautiful one that I created, and I'm thankful for it every day, but it's not real.
I keep one of Jack Kornfield's books by my bedside, A Path with Heart. And I picked it up the other day, and he pointed out that wisdom comes through the heart. And that makes me wonder if the purpose of all of our experiences here isn't a combination of, I don't want to say physical, but physical, emotional. Is it to just experience it and understand the experience, to feel the wind through our hair, to feel the sun on our skin, to try to understand why we behave a certain way? What is it about our rote reactions that we need to learn about them?
Exactly. And it's a fine line to walk, because you bring up a good point, is that sometimes it's finding answers, and sometimes it's about not finding answers. Yeah. I remember when I was younger, I used to pride myself on having a very strong mind. And I'm like, any problem comes up, my brain's got this. I can figure out anything, any turmoil, any anguish, any pain, my brain's got this. And that was obviously my very, very young 20-year-old self saying that. And it didn't take long.
Didn't work out that way.
Right. That mindset didn't really work for me all that much. Thankfully, in my meditation practice, coincidentally enough, and with my guides, they say, hey, what about mind, body, spirit, and things that are imperceivable? I'm like, I don't get how to do that. I'm like, yeah, we got you. We'll work with you on this one. And obviously, everything that I experience now is, to your point, body, mind, and spirit through everything. It's not my brain trying to figure it out. And many times my mom would say, she's like, sweetheart, you don't have to figure it out. You just got to experience it. So it's like, why does the sun feel so good on my face? Like, who cares? It does. Just enjoy it.
Oh, your mom was wise, though. It's experiential.
Yeah.
And actually, if I've made the argument, you may or may not agree with this, that meditation is experiential.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that's why it's so powerful. Because
Exactly.
you take these experiences that you've had that are intangible, and they're a part of you now.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I love that you put that out there. And I'm behind that 100%. It's experiential and it's unique because, I mean, that's one of the things we were talking about earlier. Our society says, okay, whether it be religion, whether it be media, whether it be advertising, everybody's telling us, you got to think this way. You got to think this way. You got to think this way. And it's at the risk of sounding contrarian and kind of more contrarian. It's like everybody has their own experience and nobody should try and dictate anybody else's experience. And to your point, that's what's so wonderful about a meditation practice. I mean, I don't know anything about anybody's life, your life, my mom's life, my best friend's life. I don't. I see what they want me to see. I see what I experience, but that's not even a drop of what their life is like. And one of the things that's so cool about a meditation practice is it strips away all the perceptions of everybody else, of what they think about me, of what I should be in the world or how I should be in the world. And it just says, talk about illusion. That's all the illusion. The air quotes reality is what we experience inside. And that's why meditation practice is so beneficial. And it is very unique and it is very ephemeral. And it's, to your point, it's kind of just a collection of experiences that are unique to us. I mean, that's it too. We are all connected, but how we experience that connection uniquely is what makes things interesting on Earth.
No, and personally, one of the things that I have found from a meditation practice is peace, deep peace. And that peace goes with you wherever you go. So, when somebody is driving badly or dangerously or whatever, I don't get upset. It's just, you just let it go. And part of that is the practice, the discipline of the practice of meditating is learning to let things go.
Right. And it comes and goes too. I mean,
yes,
it's my default. There are times that I'm driving, I'm like, oh my God, that idiot is driving crazy. And thankfully, that's the exception. And to your point, most of the time I'm like, well, I'm safe. I don't know what that guy or gal is rushing to, but it's not my story. It's not my path. I don't care. I'm safe. I'm good. I don't have to put a judgment on there. I don't have to say how I drive is how everybody should drive. It's like, okay. But you are absolutely right. And I don't know if it's lately or maybe I'm just more introspective about it, but on my show and talking with other guests, I'm just thinking about what my life would be like if I didn't have a meditation practice. And I don't even...
I can't even imagine. It would be horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
It would just be a monkey mind running amok constantly 24/7.
Yeah. And I try not to get that panicky, but I feel the exact same way.
That freaks me out.
Oh yeah. I'm like, because to your point, I'm like, God, I mean, I've been meditating ever since I was 18, but it's changed. And obviously the depth of my meditation has changed. And the things I've seen, the wisdom I've experienced, has changed. But yeah, I can't even imagine. I was never a frantic guy, like racked with anxiety and self-doubt. But I was a typical human, in your adolescence when the world is, revolves around you. I didn't have that awareness that I was not the center of the universe when I was younger. So yeah, exactly. So my meditation practice then was beneficial, but it's like right now, to your point, I'm like, I can't. And it goes back to what you're talking about before. The peace that I experience daily, and not all the time, obviously, but the default, I just find myself smiling so much more, and just looking. I'm like, and in just abject awe and wonder. I'm like I said, I've been on this planet for a while, and I still see things that are so new and just so. Like I was at my desk the other day, and here, just I was either doing a podcast or writing up a course. And I just saw this ant, a little tiny ant, just crawling around my desk. And I'm like, I must have looked at it for like 15 minutes. He'd crawl up on the keyboard. He'd crawl up and he'd be like doing, the whole antenna thing. And I'm just like, just fascinated. I'm just like, oh God. Any other time I'd be like, either get off or, I've never been a killer, so I couldn't kill it, but I'd never be like, dude, come on. I got stuff to do. It's just like, I was just fascinated. And those things are the default. I see so many things without that monkey mind that you were talking about, all those thoughts running around. My mind is quiet, so I can see miracles every day and just like, oh man, oh, I love life. And that sounds really Pollyannish, but it's how I feel.
Well, I was going to ask you, where does meditation and the present moment intersect? But I think you nailed it there. I think that as your mind stills, you simply learn to be more present.
Yeah, exactly. Piggybacking off what I talked about with thoughts being illusory, if we have that perception and then we live in this moment more mindfully in this present moment, then there's no way that your mind can't be stiller or more still. I don't know if stiller is a word, but anyway, we're going to go with it. Your mind can't be more still because in this moment is absolutely 100% stress free. The stress happens from thinking about how am I going to get rent paid? Is that client going to come on board? I'm like, why is my boss pissed at me? I'm like, all these things in the future that we're just replaying, and they're not even real to my point, but we're giving them reality by enforcing them, by adding that power to them. But when we say any thought is fake and there's no thought in this moment that's derailing my peace, I'm like, yeah, how can you not be peaceful when you're void of future thoughts or past thoughts, and with the perception that all thoughts are just imaginary anyways? You're like, oh, cool. Some people would say, dude, aren't you just sticking your head in the sand? I'm like, no, I'm not.
Oh, no, because now, I mean, now in this moment, you are going to create the next moment.
Yeah.
And the next. And it's not preordained.
Yeah. And that's what's so wonderful, that lack of expectation, that lack of how it's supposed to be or what everybody says it's supposed to be. I'm like, if I just let the day unfold, my life unfold, I'm like, yeah, and just see, I'm like, cool. Wow, that's great. And the other perception too is everything in my life is of my own creation. Absolutely everything. And now many people would think, dude, you're crazy. So if you got cancer, or if you got fired, or if you got in a car accident, you created that? I'm like, absolutely I did. On some level. It's not a conscious level. It's not even a subconscious level. It's somewhat of a soul level. My soul says, cool, I want you to experience this. How you go about it, you can think that you're pulling the strings as a human, but I'm like, no, I've got this. And so how we address that makes our life so either a heaven or hell, like I talked about. Like in the times I've got fired from jobs, in the past, I'd be like, oh my God, why did this happen? Before I had this epiphany that I'm like, oh, dude, that happened because you didn't want to be there anymore. Your soul said, and not because I mistyped an email or it's not something that tangible. It's just the energy field around me said, that's not where you're supposed to be. So for whatever reason, that confliction created your boss to say that this isn't a right fit, or, we did see those things, think about it. Like in the times you've gotten fired from a job, if you ever have, you're thinking, what did I do that led up to this point? Was it that project that I made a mistake on, or was it this or this or this? And you could drive yourself crazy because some quote boss would be like, yeah, dude, don't worry about it. You made a mistake. You're human. And other times when people would be like, that is unacceptable. You're out. Like, what created that dynamic? And the overall point to my story is that you created that dynamic in the energy around you. If you're supposed to be somewhere, you'll stay there. And if you're not, your body, your soul will say, it's time to move on. Whether your conscious mind says, no, this is safe. this is really safe. I got to check. This is safe. It's no, I'm supposed to be here. It's like,
Oh,
okay.
but safety is greatly overrated. I mean,
Oh,
earlier you mentioned change, just showering a different way, brushing your teeth a different way. I think learning to become comfortable with change is where you live a dynamic, fulfilling, interesting life.
yep, I agree. And it goes much like I talked about earlier, it goes against the very nature of what our society says. Change
Yes.
is bad because we don't know. Well, change is bad because you know what's right now. This is good. It's comfortable. It's safe. It's wonderful. You don't know what the other thing is. Change, for most people, change means, oh, it's going to go downhill. Change is change. It can go up, it could go down, but our society and our mindset, our reptilian brain says, no, change is really bad. Stay as comfortable as you can, as long as you can, do whatever you can to keep that comfort going. And to your point, I'm like, no, that's never been how I've lived my life.
No, I see change as creativity,
Oh,
but
yeah.
then I view life as a road trip. You
Yep.
know, and
Yep.
but there's a good correlation here that everybody can understand, and that is when you go on a vacation. Say you go to a very different place, you're more alert, you're more in the moment, you're
Yes.
more receptive to the things around you. The beach feels different than your home in the city or whatever. You're picking up on all these cues. What if you could be that present in your everyday life?
What a wonderful epiphany. And thank you for saying that so articulately, because I was just thinking about that the other day. I'm like, when you go on, and maybe even I talked about Uncommon and Fivers and Commuter, but it's like, what makes it that when you go on a vacation, you're like, oh, this is the coolest place ever, whether it be like 5 towns over another state, or if you're like in Paris or Rome, you're like, look at all this. Look at that. I'm like, I've never seen that. I'm like, look at how they eat. Look at this. And you're just like so absolutely captivated. And to your point, that could be life. If you see life that way, if you embrace that change and you have that openness, that mindfulness, every day is a vacation. And I need to be abundantly clear. I'm like, my life isn't roses and kittens 24/7. I wouldn't want it to be. I absolutely wouldn't want it to be. The times I've grown the most is when things were seemingly the most chaotic or the most challenging, whether it be getting fired from a job, my mom passing away, all these things. I'm like, I could either, just like we talked about earlier with you sharing your story, you could either say, God, this is the worst thing ever. I'm like, how am I ever going to get through this? Why is this happening to me, 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 me? Or you could just say, it happened, and just look at it. And to know that life is ups and downs. And many times people come to me to teach them meditation, like my life is a total S show. And I just need something. I'm like, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to change because you meditate. It will change because your perception will change of what life is to you. And meditation will be that mirror, that tool for you to see what is important, what's not, what's working, what's not, how to be judgment free, how to be in the moment, how to be a fan of change as opposed to paralyzed by it. I'm like, it's not going to be a cure all, but it's definitely going to be something that will shift the way you see the world. And that's the biggest thing, as I've been kind of pointing out all throughout this wonderful talk, is that your thoughts create a heaven or hell. So many people think, I'm like, well, thoughts just come and I can't stop them. I can't change them. I can't make them anything different. I'm like, well, yes and no. You don't have to, but you can just look at them objectively and say, okay, how do I look at this without getting wrapped up? How do I look at this without getting all bent out of shape? How do I see this as an avenue for growth? Whatever it is, whether it be, and I talk about this all the time, I'd say the most challenging time in my life was when my mom passed away. And for a year and a half, I didn't know that I had the ability to communicate with her in my meditation. So for a year and a half, I was just disconsolate. I'm like, the hugest source of unconditional love, and I'm going to get choked up thinking about it, and wisdom is gone to me. And I'm like, that sucks. That sucks. And for a year and a half, even with a meditation practice, I was like, God. And much of the I talked about before, there are many times in my meditations, I'd be thinking about my mom, and I'd just come out and I'd be just sobbing. But that mindset created that anxiety and that angst. And even if I didn't know that I could communicate with her a year and a half later, just accepting how things are. I mean, once I did, she told me, she's like, sweetheart, life is so much better because I'm gone. And she's like, I know you're going to take that the way it's supposed to. She's like, I am so free. She's like, I am no longer in pain. I am no longer tethered to a body. She's like, the love that you have for your dad has grown immeasurably. You are doing. I'm gonna get crap. I'm gonna get a little misty, but I make no apologies. She's like, I died before I died. She's like, I saw you all taking care of me. She's like, the love that we shared together. She's like, I never felt love more powerfully than when you were all there, sending me on my way. And she's like, my passing was a gift. I'm like, I get it, Mom. I get it. And I apologize, kinda, for losing it on your show.
Well, no, that's a massive paradigm shift. And I think there's a really important lesson there for all of us. And that is, when something happens, find a way to tell the story three ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Because with each iteration of the story, I mean, tell it from a perspective of love, of gratitude, of anger, of name your emotion.
Right.
And every time you tell the story, it gets weaker because you're realizing, one, it's fairly complex, actually. There are a lot of things that go into the story,
right.
But there's no one truth. So
no, there's no truth to our point, our initial point before. It's like whatever you want to paint on it. And I talk about this on Zen Commuter. I call it situational neutrality, that absolutely everything is a blank canvas. And we can look at it however we need to, however we want to, however is going to push our growth. We can see a car accident as a horrible thing, or it's like, maybe it's a reminder to slow down. Maybe it's a reminder to be more aware of my circumstances around me. Everything can move us forward. If we get stuck in that victimhood and that, oh, woe is me, that pity party, we're not going to grow. Another lesson will come along until we're like, oh, I get to choose the lessons. Oh, okay, cool. Got that.
I get to choose the reactions to the lessons, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but to your part, it's like, look at it from different ways. Don't get so stuck in one way. A, you'll just repeat the same story. And B, there won't be any movement because you're like, nope, this is how it is. This is how it is. This was bad. This was bad. This was bad. This was bad. And all these good things are all swirling around, but they're totally invisible to you because you're just like, nope, that's how it is. That's how it is. And all these things are swirling around. You're like, okay, he'll get it eventually.
One hopes we all get it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe this body, maybe another, maybe when we transcend bodies, who knows?
What else should I ask you? And I'm always tempted to wrap things up and, give us some advice or whatever, but there's so much advice, so much great wisdom in this discussion. Is there anything we didn't touch upon that you really want people to meditate on?
Well, there are 19 million things that we could talk about, and you and I will always be talking, which is wonderful. But to your point, I used to ask a question of my guests, and I've shied away from it just because I think we ran out of time. But I will ask it of myself, and that is, the question is, if you had the attention of the entire world, what would you want the world to know? And so if I was poised with that question, I would say that you are divine. You are not in the image of God. And this, of course, is my opinion. You are God. You are a piece of God. And we are all pieces of God. And we are all light and love. And there is, in those times when you feel sad or lonely or disconnected, that's just your perception. You are connected to all life. So you never have to feel that you are alone in this world. You are powerful. You are divine. And your purpose on this earth is to shine, is to understand all the gifts that you have and not just share them or not just use them for your own benefit, but more so to the benefit of all people and all life, to shine your light as bright as you can to every corner of the globe as much as you can and as bright as you can. So that would be the takeaway.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path. because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.